Bonjour à tous. Hello everyone. This is Marie-Soleil, naturopath. Bonjour à tous. Ce podcast aujourd'hui sera exceptionnellement en anglais. Donc, hello everyone again. This podcast will be today in English. I'm very, very happy to have Dr. Michael Jurgelewicz as my invite today. Welcome, Dr. Mike.
Thank you, Marie-Soleil.
It's a real pleasure that you have accepted to do this podcast with me. We've met before. We've actually seen each other a few times because of Designs for Health in back in the day when we were allowed to travel and see all those interesting conferences in the US. I've been wanting to share this information about ketones for a long time. So thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your knowledge. For the people that don't know you, can you explain to us a little bit of your past? In the presentation for the advertising of our podcast today, I mentioned that you were a power lifter, but at the basic, you started studying as a chiropractor, if I'm correct.
Correct.
And then you moved on and you studied some nutritional and functional medicine in the US, that's right?
Yeah, so my current role with Designs for Health is the Director of Product Development and Clinical Support. So I support our product development team and our Chief Medical Officer in the execution and formulation of all of our new product development, reformulations, and we're always looking for novel raw materials and the things that we can use from a nutritional therapeutic standpoint and offer in the line. There's close to 400 SKUs in the US and probably around 160 or so in Canada. My background, I'm a doctor of chiropractic, board certified in clinical nutrition through the American Board of Clinical Nutrition. And I also do some adjunct faculty at University of Bridgeport for their Masters of Nutrition program.
Excellent. And I really enjoy the fact that you're always looking at the updated research also for sports nutrition and that you test a lot of those products on yourself. So that's why I mentioned that also in the resume. So today we're going to speak of exogenous ketones. So these are products in a powder form that you can drink and that helps the body be in a ketosis state. The reason why I wanted to do this podcast with you is I think that it's a product that has a lot of opportunities and that it's not well known enough. Also, the reason I wanted to bring this to light is that I find that with the keto diet in the last few years, I've seen in my clinic a lot of people not necessarily always having good results with the keto diet or not being able to tolerate the keto diet. As we know, in the keto diet, there's a lot of fat, and that's something sometimes that some people will not be able to metabolize right, or some people have side effects. And we also know that women have more trouble with the keto diet because they need more carbs, they need more fiber, and that's all related to their hormonal system. And I've found in my clinical practice, and I've also seen with other colleagues, some women that are in estrogen dominance, and I talk about estrogen dominance in other podcasts where I explain the different definitions because there's different ways to see the estrogen dominance, but a typical estrogen dominance where the woman has difficulty maybe metabolizing their estrogens, excreting them. If you're giving them a lot of fat, sometimes it increases the estrogen dominance, or we can see sometimes people that fail with the keto diet because we're not supporting their gut with enough fiber. So I wanted to look at all the opportunities with you today with the exogenous ketones, and also we'll plug in a really nice fiber product that can help in those situations where people have trouble and are struggling with the keto diet.
Definitely. So
Excellent.
I wanted to put a few reviews in here, and if we think about really exogenous ketones, there's only been research probably for over the last 5 years that you're seeing some human clinical trials and really the excitement around different applications. But as we look at nutritional ketosis and exogenous ketones, there's definitely differences between them, but there's benefits of of obviously both. But to what you mentioned previously is with ketogenic diets, there can be an issue with compliance. When you first think about a ketogenic diet, which is typically decreasing your carbohydrates less than 30 to 50 grams per day. Obviously everyone's metabolically different, so it may be easier for some individuals to get into a nutritional ketosis state versus other individuals. But the Mayo Clinic started using a ketogenic diet and nutritional ketosis back in the 1920s, mainly to treat epilepsy as well as type 1 diabetes. And then, although it was very effective, it fell to the side because medications became available for these various conditions. And then over several decades later, there are certain individuals that may have had side effects or they can't tolerate some of these medications. And you started to see around the 1990s nutritional ketosis or ketogenic diets being used for these type of individuals. And more recently, just from the benefits that you see with ketone bodies, we're starting to see other populations that can benefit with metabolic types of dysfunction, such as obesity and insulin resistance and diabetes, which we're going to talk about a little bit. But one of the first things I wanted to kind of compare a little bit from this review published last year was just looking at some of the differences between a ketogenic diet, which again, you're having a low caloric intake from carbohydrates, typically high amounts of fat, and then you have to keep protein relatively restricted as well. So people can still benefit from weight loss and other things without being in ketosis, and that's where some of these exogenous ketones come in. But when you think about a ketogenic diet, in order for the body to get blood ketone levels to a certain amount, it can take days to weeks. And for people to get really switched over to a pure fat adapted state could take as long as 6 weeks. And if people are measuring stuff, just because they're not achieving that blood level does not mean that they're getting benefits of weight loss and some of the other benefits with lowering blood glucose. Some of the advantages around exogenous ketones is you can essentially achieve a blood ketone level or ketone body level within minutes to hours. So if let's say, for example, someone is following a ketogenic diet, they're in ketosis, and they have one meal that puts them out. Maybe they had too much protein, they had some extra carbs. Instead of taking upwards of maybe 24 hours to get back into a ketogenic state metabolically, this can be kind of fast tracked with using the exogenous ketones.
And for our listeners that are not maybe comfortable with the exogenous ketones, we're talking here about a powder product that you put in water that you can take in replacement of a meal or with a meal, but it can help like suppress appetite. So if someone is trying, for example, to do an intermittent fasting but is not tolerating it well because they have too much appetite, or they find that their energy is low, they could take this product the next day after cheating, for example, and it's going to bring them back in a ketosis state, and then they're going to get the benefits as if they were like in a real like controlled keto diet or fasting state, right?
Yeah. So when you look at different types of look at this table on the top right, you can see exogenous ketones, ketone salts, or you have ketone monoesters. So they're typically the two types of ketone supplements you see on the market. The salts are basically bound to a salt, so it's usually a calcium, a sodium, or a magnesium. And with this specific product, you have a blend of all three. And then it's good to always have some potassium in there to buffer it, right? Because you want to have the electrolytes buffered well. You typically see anywhere from 5 to 10 grams as a serving. And as you mentioned, it can definitely help blunt glucose. And so when you think about, some of the benefits here, especially on appetite, whether you're in doing a ketogenic diet or taking exogenous ketones, you're able to suppress hunger, which can be very good, and we'll talk about that shortly, as well as its impact on glucose availability, because you have to think about energy substrates. We're typically relying the brain and skeletal muscle, a lot of our tissues are using glucose if we're in a constant fed state. And obviously, if we want to be able to use other potential, in this case, ketone bodies can be a cleaner fuel for some individuals, and it has ability to make ATP almost more efficiently than glucose. And so these are some of the different aspects of it, as well as looking at performance, which we want to look into it a little bit as well. So it's going to depend on really what type of activity someone's doing that can benefit from it. But just like any sort of form of exercise, depending on what you're doing, you're going to be using different energy substrates. For example, if you're doing something more like powerlifting, or you're using weight training, or you're doing high explosive stuff, you're going to rely on more of your fast-acting glycolysis, your phosphagen system, creatine phosphate. However, when you're looking at more endurance and cardiovascular exercise over prolonged periods of time, you rely more on your fat for that, and that's where the ketone bodies can almost spare your glycogen stores. So
that's
the next
interesting.
The first area I think we would be good to look into a little bit, because I think this is going to probably appeal or apply to most individuals that are going to be using exogenous ketones, or we're going to see the most people to benefit from this, is there was a review published last year really on the impact of ketosis on appetite regulation, and some of the first studies were done in 2017. And this is important for those individuals that have obesity, type 2 diabetes. Only 1 in 6 people maintain weight loss after 1 year. And part of this is compliance, and it could be due to just really increased hunger. When you're having, as soon as you have more than 50 grams or closer to 100 grams or more of carbs, you're going to have that increased hunger. So there's different mechanisms, and what I like about this review, and I put a picture from it, is it shows some of the different mechanisms on the exogenous. It shows some of the mechanisms on the exogenous ketones, and you can see here, specifically in the periphery, it's going to act on some of your gut peptides. So you have your CCK, your peptide YY, and your GLP-1. So it's going to increase, it's going to stimulate that. So those gut peptides are normally stimulated when we're eating a meal. So so when we eat our meal, that's what's telling us that we're full. And so that increases. So now we're going to have a decrease in hunger, but it's also going to decrease ghrelin, and ghrelin is our hunger hormone. So during periods of fasting or ketosis or starvation, the ghrelin goes up. So these hormones are typically going to work indirectly, and that's kind of the mechanism. You also have some of these receptors or these hormones in the CNS, central nervous system, as well. So it's going to helping with satiety. And I think for those individuals that are really struggling, especially when you do any sort of restricted caloric diet, you're going to have increased hunger. And this is just one tool that helps with compliance. And we know that a ketogenic diet is going to be hard for a lot of people to maintain. Not everyone in in someone's family is going to be on board with it. So you're kind of the outsider, and there's lots of things kind of stacked against it. But how can we achieve some benefits from a metabolic standpoint? Because as you mentioned earlier, Marie-Soleil, is everyone is kind of biochemically different, right? And metabolically different. And there's different circumstances where someone may not want to be in a ketogenic diet. And we don't want to force one diet specifically on every individual, where when you're looking at insulin resistance, obesity, there's lots of diets that work, such as low carb diet, intermittent fasting, total caloric replacement. And all of these work on different mechanisms and have benefits, but it's really trying, I think, to look at what people, what foods people really like to eat, how you can put that in a diet around them that they're going to achieve success and compliance with, but then also helping them to mitigate some of these issues that they may run into when they've tried previous diets and were not successful previously.
Mm-hmm. Well, for sure. And what got me interested in these exogenous ketones is also the fact that I went to a symposium in 2017 in Baltimore, USA, and there's many researchers, doctors, nutritionists talking about the keto diet, but there's a few companies there presenting their exogenous ketones. Some of them were really not palatable, very difficult to taste. So luckily, the advances now make the products easier to drink, especially the one from Designs for Health. I actually find it's a very easy one to drink. But what I really wanted to enlighten people with this today, that it's not only about being in ketosis, it's also the health benefits of those ketones, which help inflammation, which help brain function. So many people that I see in my clinic are fatigued, have difficulty concentrating, have inflammation. So there's some people that have such severe cases that if you try to put them on a specific diet, they have so many symptoms and they're doing so poorly with their energy levels that they kind of need a little help. So I find that this product is interesting because yes, there's so many things that we can do with food, but we know that it's not always easy to change all your food or to cook everything properly if you're very fatigued, and maybe even if you're suffering from inflammation. So that's why I wanted to talk about all these benefits from this product.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, the BHBs, when we think about it from an exogenous standpoint, is a signaling molecule. So we were talking about with obesity and type 2 diabetes, you actually get a blunting in the glucose, in the fasting glucose. We don't really know some of the mechanisms behind it, but it definitely is a way to help control that and keep those spikes in check. So I think one of the next things we'll talk about, since you brought up their neurodegenerative type, cognition, is this is another area where exogenous ketone bodies are going to be good for supporting the nervous system in these neurodegenerative diseases, because you can see from the picture here, and what you mentioned is when you're talking about inflammation and helping with that, is you can see that these ketone bodies actually inhibit oxidative stress and neuroinflammation. And when you think about it, neurodegenerative diseases, whether it's Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, they're protein misfolding conditions. And the difference between what condition someone has is basically the protein that misfolds and then the location of it. So when you're looking at things like cognitive impairment, cognitive decline, you're looking at more your amyloid plaques and some tau proteins. But essentially, what you would be getting is that blunting effect of that neuroinflammation. And then these individuals also have impaired glucose metabolism. That's why you typically hear Alzheimer's is called type 3 diabetes, because there's impairment in that glucose metabolism. And this provides another fuel source. A lot of people who have cognitive decline can have cerebral glucose metabolism cut by close to 45%. So this provides or restores that energy metabolism. So I think when you see on the picture here, improvement in global cognition, improvement in language, improvement in memory, this is exciting stuff. You see a few studies with following a nutritional ketosis diet, but where you see some of the other stuff with maybe executive function and concentration, where you're not really seeing a change, I think it's important to note, these individuals have neurodegenerative conditions, right? And we're not necessarily preventing it, but this is one tool. When we want to have a treatment plan or recommendations, this is blunting that inflammatory insult, right? But at the same standpoint, to get probably the benefits in other things as well, is you really need to kind of improve the plasticity of the existing neurons. And that's why you see improvements with when people are doing different games and crossword puzzles, doing exercise, because they're doing you basically need a fuel source for the neuron to stay alive, which you're getting from the BHB salts, and then you need stimulation. So you need the activation from different ways to put that connectivity together. And when you do multiple things together like this, then you get that plasticity and you get overall function that's going to improve. And that's where you see things. So just if someone may see a benefit, but they definitely would want to still take stuff really long term, because you're still going to prevent that constant insult of the inflammation that would be occurring.
Mm-hmm. So for the people that are listening right now, I'm curious. Hi, everyone. Maybe give us a little thumbs to tell us you're listening and that you're enjoying. I'm curious. Have any of you tried the exogenous ketones on the market? They're mostly BHBs. I haven't seen many of the other form that you mentioned at the beginning, except in that conference. Does anyone want to share? Just say yes. Have they tried? Have they enjoyed? Have they had benefits from trying exogenous ketones? And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the chat. We will try to answer questions at the end. So we'll see if any come. We can continue now, and we'll see what comes up in a few minutes.
I think the other area that we see a lot of people being excited or interested in exogenous ketones is really about how this can help with performance. And as you mentioned, just with my background with powerlifting and exercise interests and working out, it's always good to see different ergonomic aids that you can use to improve performance. And this is mainly the benefits that you're going to see, at least right now, because we're still in the early stages of the research, but it seems like it's going to be more beneficial in the longer term endurance type events. So people are doing marathons, longer runs, things like that. Because when you think about the fuel selection during exercise, it's it's not exclusively all one. Like you start doing something, and then eventually it's going to change from your phosphagen to your glycolysis, then to using fat stores. But you have the ability to utilize carbohydrates, fats. Skeletal muscle can resynthesize ATP from protein, lactate, and then ketone bodies. So that's kind of where the interest is. Interestingly enough, exogenous ketones also stimulate muscle protein synthesis, and so there may be a recovery aspect as well. But essentially, what it's doing is it's sparing muscle glycogen. So, like if you already have what you would typically get your glycogen stores from carbohydrates. So if people are not in nutritional ketosis, they're eating a good amount of carbohydrates. If they want to get the benefit from the endurance standpoint, they would essentially supplement with the exogenous ketones prior to whatever event they're going to do, and it's going to preserve some of those glycogen stores. So they're going to be able to maintain that level of endurance or performance for a longer duration. So that would be the benefits of using exogenous ketones from a exercise performance standpoint.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting, and we have some people that see us, in clinical practice. Then some of us have the BIA machine to test body composition. So I find this point super interesting, especially for women, because we know that as we age, we lose a lot of muscle mass. So if I'm dealing with a woman that already has low muscle mass and she's cutting her protein because she's wanting to do a keto diet, and especially if she's doing the intermittent fasting, well, adding those ketones will definitely preserve the muscle mass. So I find that's very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the mechanisms too with nutritional ketosis. When we go into a more of a either intermittent fasting, you're either in a starved state, or you're having that state because of really not having the carbohydrates, but it's going to spare your muscle tissue. So we have those mechanisms to help with that. So this is the product that we have in Canada, the BHB Synergy, which is again a combination of the three BHB salts along with potassium in there, because we know potassium's it's important to kind of balance the sodium potassium ratios from the electrolyte standpoint. I didn't really put any slides in it, but there's also a trademarked American ginseng on here called Cereboost, which ginseng has improvements with improving spatial and working memory. This is typically the area of the hippocampus that's responsible for that, and it's a good standardized material. So but the thought process with that ingredient in there was obviously having the synergy from the nootropic standpoint to a lot of people that take exogenous ketones or nutritional ketosis, they like it for that clearer focus. And then when you're looking at people from a performance standpoint, they like that focus and tension. That's going to help with performance, and then also with neurodegenerative condition, that's going to help with cognition. So it really applies to really anyone that would using the salts and having some nice synergy with it. So I know Marie-Soleil, with the time, you wanted to talk about another type of ingredient that is typically lacking in a ketogenic diet, that can be a real good adjunctive treatment here, by getting some different types of fiber that they normally wouldn't get from their diet.
Well, that's what I've realized with all my research in the last year on sex hormones and estrogen dominance, and dealing with a lot of women that have challenges with their hormonal state. There's so many studies now linking the microbiome and all those good or bad bacteria and link and how it's going to influence the hormonal system. And we know that in the keto diet, it reduces a lot of the good fiber that helps balance out those gut bacteria that will influence how we will recycle or not our estrogen. So that's what worries me with a keto diet, especially if the person is doing intermittent fasting. That means that they have maybe just 2 meals a day. Some people even have 1 meal a day. So we definitely have to look at the content of fiber in their diet. So it's something that we can add to this BHB product, so people can drink the ketones and can add either in their drink, or I was wondering your opinion, would you put maybe the fiber later? And there's some specific fibers that are more interesting than others. So I really wanted to look at the one from DFH. I think it's a super composition, and some ingredients there are interesting for people to understand the mechanism of the resistant starch that we've been hearing about more and more through I think the plantain bananas have won in popularity in the last years because of that reason.
Yeah, I'll put this one slide up, but just as the name implies, it's a type of starch that's resistant to digestion. And I put, for ease of the audience, there's 4 different types of resistant starches that are out there. And in this type of supplement, you're using a potato starch from a raw form of potato, so it's an RS type 2, as well as your green and banana flour. So because they have that high amylase content. And what you're really seeing with the benefits is, obviously they're not going to be metabolized higher up in the gut, lower down. So it's going to help more with increasing your short chain fatty acids, which obviously then when you start talking about short chain fatty acids and butyrate, there's improvements with cardiovascular disease, slowing chronic kidney disease, helping with inflammation, oxidative stress. So again, it hits on a lot of some of the same mechanisms, but you're working on the gut and really supporting stuff that a lot of these people that are on a ketogenic diet, even though like green leafy vegetables and other types of fiber may not have high carbohydrate content, many times people will still omit fruits and vegetables from their diet and some of the starches just because of get it going out of ketosis. But as we know, a lot of those compounds have a lot of polyphenols and anti-inflammatory properties. They also have a lot of vitamins in them. So but it's important for overall gut health, especially with people that may be struggling with motility and risks for other types of IBS to inflammatory bowel diseases. So it's important to really making sure that we're optimizing the overall health of the microbiome.
Well, another term, probiotics have been popular for over 10 years now. in the general public. But what's not enough popular right now, I find, is prebiotics. And these starches act actually as prebiotics, pre meaning that they feed the pro, so they feed the good bacteria. And I think that's just something worth mentioning, that when you're doing the keto diet, you might be not feeding enough those good bacteria. And also, because we were talking a lot about society and suppressing appetite, well, these fibers actually have a really nice ability to cut appetite, but also, since they're feeding those gut bacteria, and as you mentioned, they produce those short chain fatty acids, they actually produce energy. So those short chain fatty acids, such as butyrate, are known to produce energy, so they can actually contribute to the overall well-being also in these type of restricted diets. But my question for you, would you add it with the BHB drink in the morning, or would you prefer giving it later in the day? Do you have a preference?
I guess it probably depends on like how what people are using the products for. I mean, clearly with the BHB salts, if people are looking just to kind of help them with nutritional ketosis, they may dose this spaced out through the day. Again, if it's for performance, it's for an event. With the fiber, it could be too, like maybe there's one meal a day that they're not really getting as much fiber, and then there's other ones where they may be getting a little bit in, and it's a way just to supplement their diet. So,
Okay.
but as long as they're getting it in daily, obviously you're going to get the benefit. But as you mentioned with probiotics, what I think is important to note is, I mean, obviously probiotics are really good. There's good research on probiotics, but again, you can only put specific bacteria in a capsule, and your lactobacillus and bifido species are the ones that are your facultative anaerobes, because they can survive in that type of environment. But 95% of the microbiota is anaerobic, so you can't put like Akkermans. Well, you can't put some of those other strains like Clostridia and some of the E. coli into a probiotic. So the way you get those populations up is with those prebiotics. So whether you're increasing the dietary fiber, giving sort of XOS or GOS, different types of different fibers there. But in general, there's some individuals too that may not tolerate probiotics well, with small bacterial intestinal overgrowth and other things. But with a type of fiber like this, it's a good way to support their microbiome and increase dietary fiber.
And would you try it slow at the beginning? I think I've had people that have maybe sometimes have a little bit of gas producing with certain fibers. Would you start slowly to slowly adapt the bowel?
Yeah, I would probably start with half a dose and then increase and see how they do. I mean, and that could be the same thing with the exogenous ketones as well, where there's 10 grams of the BHB salts, and if someone's body has never been in nutritional ketosis, it may be a shock to have some BHBs for the first time. So it could be one of those things that could slowly kind of titrate up as well.
So would you also do it slowly with the BHB to slowly adapt?
Exactly.
I know sometimes people can have it's beneficial effects on the bowel, but would you start slowly, maybe with a quarter of the dose and work?
Yeah, I would try that as well. And I think one thing that we forgot to mention is for those people that do want to follow a strict ketogenic diet. A lot of times they fail because within 2 to 3 weeks, because it's very restrictive and they're not at a fat adapted stage yet. It takes several weeks there for the body to adapt. And so when you hear someone that says they try a ketogenic diet and they get some of the what they call like the keto flu, and where they get the hunger issues, they get headaches and other things, just because you're going through that transition, the exogenous ketones will typically get rid of those side effects and help transition that if they want to do it, because many times they do a ketogenic diet and I tried it and I wasn't getting the benefits. Like, well, how long did you do it? It was like 3 weeks. It's just like, well, you didn't try it for maybe like 2 to 3 months, and so some of these individuals, it may take longer, and the exogenous ketones is a nice way to make that transition as easy as possible.
Amazing. So I can't wait to get feedback on these two products. So I know we've gone overboard with our half an hour planning, but we do have an important question. Maybe we can just cover this one and then I'll let you go for the day. But the interactions with especially the BHB, because normally there's no there's no or not many contraindications, but in the product, as you mentioned, there's the ginseng. What would you think would have to be careful for the practitioners listening to us or the people taking medication? What do they have to mention to their pharmacist?
I mean, obviously, unfortunately, as a supplement manufacturer, we're not going to really be able to advise on how to give with medications. It's always up to the healthcare provider to kind of look at their databases and see, typically, this type of botanical American ginseng is not going to really have any sort of contra indications for the most part. Obviously, anytime you're dealing with pregnancy, nursing, there's always going to be insufficient research to advise during that time. So we just wouldn't advise the botanicals then. But with the BHB salts, I think there's always going to be individuals that, again, may be concerned with a sodium content, but then again, you have the potassium in there to kind of balance it. And I think it's always important to kind of see what other underlying issues that individual may have. But many times, if people are transitioning to low carbohydrate, nutritional ketogenic diet, they will usually get the benefits.
Okay, sounds good. So maybe just check like for kidney status because of the the potassium and the sodium, I guess.
Yep.
Okay, sounds good. And for the fiber, there's not contraindications from what I recall. It's more tolerance level. So
yeah,
go
exactly.
slowly to work yourself up.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the difference would be is there wouldn't be anything to be concerned about. It's just more of like your non-serious adverse reactions. So people can have like just some GI type symptoms, and unfortunately, a lot of times people already have GI symptoms, and they may notice that when they eat certain foods, but then when they have it with a supplement, they're like, oh my God, it is a supplement, but they don't think about it with food. So it's just a matter of getting that optimized over time. So
yeah, we can compare it to someone that would add legumes in their diet for the first time, and after taking them out, you need like to some time for the bowel to just I don't know how to say it in English, but yeah, it's better to work yourself up and let the body adapt.
Yep.
Okay, sounds good. Well, thank you so much for your time this summer. Thanks for accepting my invitation.
No problem.
This is amazing information. I really hope this will help many people that were listening to us, and this will be recorded. So if you have any questions, we'll do our best to answer them. And have a great summer, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.